Hello, my name is Carissa Byington. This is my code review video for my CS499 Computer Science Capstone course. In my first enhancement one, which is the code I have right up here, it is from the course CS330, Computational Graphics and Visualization, where we utilized OpenGL to create a 3D rendered scene involving shapes, um, lighting, textures, colors, and various other characteristics to make one full 3D scene. To begin with my code, I will just go through the existing functions that was created previously and just describe what they do. Then I would move on to analyzing my code, determining my strengths and weaknesses, my enhancement plan, and move on from there. Alright, so to begin with, enter the scene manager for the 3D environment. We have our constructor method, excuse me, if I speak today, shader manager, which initializes that as well as the shape meshes for the rest of our project. The constructor is opens up our resources, and let's see. The create GL texture will help us load image files such as textures that we want to upload and use in our 3D environment. And then we have the bind GL texture method. It is used for binding loaded textures into open GL texture memory slots. Within this, there's only 16 slots at the end. Let's see. Then destroy GL textures. I believe that is to free up any memory within the texture memory slots. Most of this was already created for the course and was not edited by me during the course. That is further on in the environment. Find texture ID and find a texture slot. Find texture slot. This helps find any textures. Find material method that we have declared here is used for retrieving any material properties. Here we have our set transformations. This helps with placing our this is helpful for placing our objects within the 3D environment, and this helps with scaling later and transforming in order to create a more robust 3D environment. Set shader color helps us set certain colors within our environment. This helps us select the specific numbers used for the colors to create custom colors, I believe. And then we have set shader texture. Allows us to set the texture associated with an ID. We have a set texture UV scale, which is used for setting the texture UV scale values into the shader. Shader material method is also something we use to pass material values into the shader. And this is where I began to modify and upload my own textures into my environment. The original one contained a book, a candle jar, a nail polish bottle, and a background, a floor and a background, excuse me. They were basic colors, but in my enhancement, I did want to add on to that and create labels, um, create better lighting to make it look more realistic, and even add shadows to the effects. But this is where I uploaded my initial textures from my own program. I was able to import it with the specific tags I have here to call on later. Define object materials. This method is used to define the reusable materials within the scene. Set up scene lights method is used to set up the different lights in the scene. They could be spotlight, point lights, and even entire light scenes as daylight I have here. The prepare scene I had was able to load any meshes and set up the initial scene I felt, as such as with I made sure I preloaded any shapes that I would want to use within my environment. Some of these are not used as indicated by the notes here, but I still wanted to have them included in case I did want to call on them later. My render scene method was actually used to develop the 3D scene. This helps transform and pretty much creates each object based on position for the scales and as well as applying the texture and message and even lighting to each specific to each specific 3D drawing I created. So this is where I created one of the objects, which is the bottle of nail polish within my scene. First, I began by scaling the object to be the correct shape according to my source image. So I made sure I had scaled it to the appropriate size within the scene. I made sure that the XYZ rotations for the mesh were correct. I had the bottle turned at an angle, which is why the others are at 0. And this one, the Y rotation is set at 64 to be turned at an angle. The position within the plane was edited here to make sure that it was more left on the plane as compared to other objects. Here I did not include the set shader color, as later on I changed it to use just the texture itself, as I felt the color took away from the texture. Here I called on the texture to import and assign to this shape. Earlier on the bottle, early on in my texture uploads, the bottle was there. And for the shed shader material class, this was also created earlier. I added this so that the shine would be added. And then this is where I initialized the shape for that scene. And as you can see, I did that for each individual shape. I rendered each object, applied transformations, textures, materials, and possibly even colors to create a overall 3D environment. I believe my biggest strengths within this project include the commenting and organization. I believe everything is spaced out pretty well. I still included original comments I made along the way in case I wanted to reference back. I also stated what each function did for each shape to also reference back to, which also helps explain how I was able to pull off the final project. I also believe I was able to apply transformations for the objects dynamically. Not everything was just at a straight front face. Some items I made sure to put at an angle or even rotate to be able to stand up vertically as shown here. I don't think that there's also many areas for improvement needed, as I believe I documented really well, have a fully functional program here, as well as made sure it's very organized and spaced apart for better readability. As for my enhancement plan, I did want to add possibly another object within my render scene. I also wanted to apply even more textures than just the basic one texture I added. I would like to play with adding 2 textures, including, excuse me, including like For the nail polish, the glass, I believe, the bottle. As for the nail polish bottle, there was in real life, a logo added onto the front. I would like to play around and add um, another picture onto the bottle that worked well within the scene. And then I wanted to see about creating shadows for the objects. As far as creating those shadows, I would like to try to play around with the lighting within the scene. If that does not yield the results I would like, I may just try to create a new shape behind certain objects already created, um, with very minimal to no texture, and try to make it as transparent and grayscale as possible for those shadows. The only problem I would run into that would be the lighting. It would not be realistic if the shadows were a shape itself. So therefore, I would like to try to add a new element for um, realistic shadowing within this environment. As for skills demonstrated within this enhancement, I believe it shows that I will my software testing and documentation. It shows well documentation throughout, as well as testing to over time. I test multiple times my 3D scene to make sure it's being rendered correctly, which I believe shows um, enhancements within that category as far as you know overall testing and documentation purposes. I also believe that this shows my proficiency with OpenGL as a whole and C++ language. As for the course outcomes supported within this enhancement, I do believe it shows my proficiency in software design, as it shows how I was able to create a working a 3D environment by designing the software needed. For my second enhancement, I did choose to reflect upon an assignment from CS320. Specifically, this assignment is a Java-based language program that helps manage appointments and contacts. It also focuses heavily on unit testing and validation inputs. To just go through the existing functionality of the code, here we did initiate the class appointment. We also declared variables, new ID, appointment date, and appointment description, which we will call upon later within the assignment. We also validated our appointment date with certain appointment parameters, and it created a boolean to return false if it's null, or return true. We also did the same with appointment description. We also threw illegal argument exceptions, which enforced validation for our constructor method. Excuse me. Here we have our constructors, our getter and setter methods, which also we made sure to include validation logic with it as well. Our appointment service test class, we have here where we initiated the actual test class, and then our actual tests are here. For our add a new appointment test, we made sure to declare the variables to start out with, and then we created the test and to make sure that um, our add new appointment method is validated and it was stored correctly. Our delete new appointment test did test the logic for deleting an existing appointment, and then also making sure that it removed from storage here where we confirm delete. Here we tested adding a new appointment with a null description, and then to make sure we validate, it throws an illegal argument exception. And then here we also tested for adding a new appointment with a empty description, as seen here. And within our contact class, this is where you see we declared the variables to be used within this class. And then from here, we made sure to validate those methods, or excuse me, those variables to make sure that they're correct. Our constructor method for this class, it does help us enforce the validation as well as throws any exceptions, as you see here. For our contact service class, we did use array list for storing the contacts, as seen here. We also here have our delete contact method, the method to update the first name within our system, update the last name, update phone number, as well as update address. Within our contact service test class, this is where we actually test and validate our inputs. So for the first one, we're testing add contact. Here I just added myself to make sure, and then I went ahead and had the validation here to make sure that it was into our system. So for testing deleting contact, I went ahead and tested for that previously made contact. I, excuse me, I was added using add contact and then deleting the contact at index 1 and then later validating that method did work. Here we are creating a contact with a phone number and then testing to make sure that there is a phone number, or excuse me, that we are testing that that updated phone number was in fact updated correctly. And this is where we're validating that input. This is the test to validate that we updated the first name and the contact correctly. This is where it validates. This is also where we are updating the last name and validating that it was in fact updated from Byington to Evans, and this is where we validate it. And then we're also validating that the address was updated correctly. This was the original, this was the updated, and then this is where we're validating that it was updated within our list. I believe some of my weaknesses throughout this assignment would be that they are well coded, I believe, with minimal bugs, as well as very clean and organized. I also believe implementing HashMap does help us store the data and enables our system just to be able to look it up faster. Some weaknesses within my code would definitely be within this assignment, I don't believe I have the best documentation. It's very minimal. I would like to expand upon that just for a learning and student standpoint to call back on and exactly see where exactly I was going with certain areas and just for better readability as well. Some areas of enhancement I would definitely state would be as I used HashMap within appointment service, excuse me. I don't believe I implemented that in contact service. I would like to do that just for faster lookup. Within both test classes, I did want to add a boundary test. I do not previously have. Just a test that makes sure that input stays within a certain character boundary, whether it be 10 characters or 60 characters. I would like to implement a test for boundaries within both the appointment service test as well as the contact service test classes. Some of my skills demonstrated within this assignment, I definitely would believe would be that of unit testing, especially when it comes to setting up the entire testing method for different variables or methods such as update, last name, and then also being able to validate within that test as well. I believe this assignment definitely aligns with certain course outcomes, especially when it comes to um, demonstrating testing and debugging strategies, which I hope to effectively prove within my final enhancement. For my enhancement 3, I did reference back to an assignment from my course CS340. This enhancement does fall under the database category within this capstone course. So this project does include a CRUD Python module with the animal shelter class. We utilize this with MongoDB operations in order to utilize a dashboard to visualize and filter existing animal data within a CSV file. Within the CRUD Python file, it is the back end of this connection. It does initialize the Mongo database connection. It uses my hard entered credentials here that was previously set up within the ePortfolio or the virtual desktop. As I have accessed it via my computer, I'm not sure if the functionality will be quite the same, but I am going to be testing that out within my enhancement program. So CRUD stands for Create, Read, Update, and Delete. So therefore, within my CRUD Python file, I did create those methods here. The create method here does help create a new document into the animal collection within the database. The read method actually retrieves a document within that animal database. The update method does update or modify any example entries within that list and will return that new updated modification. Excuse me. And finally, the delete method will actually select an existing part of that database and delete it from the full collection. So for our dashboard, it is our front end of this assignment. I did have to utilize my username and password that was set up and defined within the CRUD file to make sure I was able to access that information. So here we are utilizing the animals.read function to actually load all the records into a default data frame for this dashboard. Here we are setting up the actual visual of our dashboard with a preloaded logo from the previous assignment, as well as a already pre-existing CSS style sheet for the dashboard. So here, after we have set up our layout view for the actual dashboard, now it was time for us to differentiate what data to include. Here, we actually displayed the breeds of animals based on different data types. So for water rescue, we made sure to filter out that data using the read function to make sure that the animal type, breed, sex upon outcome, age upon outcome in weeks did match what our variables were within our data frame. That way we would be able to collect that information in our final dashboard. We did the same for mountain or wilderness rescue filter, as well as disaster rescue or individual tracking filter. Otherwise, we reset to no filter. Here you can see that we are using Plotly to display the breed histogram, as well as down here you can see that we used the dash leaflet to map the location of the actual animals. So as far as our Mongo database integration within this assignment, our CRUD methods to directly call and interact with database. For our create, we're actually directly calling on the find method. For update, we are calling on the update mini. For delete, we're calling on delete mini, as well as, okay, I'm so sorry. Read method was for find, and then create was for the insert method. So here you can see using the read function, our dashboard is actually utilizing this function to call and display this data corresponding with each of the filters that we provided. I do believe the strengths that are found within my assignment is definitely accessing Mongo database and being able to perform standard operations with Mongo incorporated. Also, using the CRUD functions to read and call on, or even update, delete various, methods of that existing data within the database. And then also being able to create a dashboard that does call on back end information with front end activity here. I will say some of my weaknesses, specifically when I was first trying to complete this assignment. My credentials, the instantaneous connection, it did not quite work for me. I tried to get feedback from my instructor, and I did not get much help. Therefore, I'm really hoping that part of my enhancement would be just to help create more functionality in general with this assignment and get this connection instantialized. Now that it will be on my computer itself instead of through the virtual workspace, I'm hoping that that'll go a lot more smoother in that process. Another example would be my documentation is very limited as well. Um, my assignment for my first assignment was really well done, but my second and third one, it is very minimal. I would like to expand upon that. So the main part of my enhancement plan for this assignment it would be to build a RESTful API utilizing Flask. Um, I would like to do that and utilize my CRUD class as well and be able to define API endpoints to hopefully be able to run a server utilizing that RESTful API and be able just to show my proficiency with databases and how much I've learned and grown from the beginning to now.